We'll get started. Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming to our session. My name's Sam Lightowler. I'm a product owner at CBC for web presentation. I've been working on digital products at CBC for about 6 years now, and right now my team is working on doing a massive redesign of all of the CBC websites.
And I'm Jade. I'm a Scrum Master for the content management system team at CBC. I have about 4 years in agile leadership experience. And currently our team is working on the content management systems that are text-based for our website.
So we adopted an agile way of working at CBC over 2 years ago now, and over the course of those 2 years we've run several experiments to try and improve the way that we work. So we're hoping to share some of those experiments, the successes and failures with you today.
Now specifically we're going to focus on trust and collaboration and how we've gone from dysfunctional to more cross-functional. So just a quick view of what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about who we are and what we do, our metrics and what they tell us, autonomy and interdependence and which one wins. We'll talk a little bit about our successes and failures as a department, actually a lot, and what's next.
So to provide some context for what we're going to talk about, I'll share a little bit about what we do in digital operations. So both Jade and I work in CBC's digital operations department, and if you can imagine, it's almost like a big web with digital operations right in the middle. Around us we've got content producers that are producing our news content, sports content, radio, TV. We've got business units like communications and revenue. Digital operations is in the center. It's the core to all of that. We're responsible for building out all of the digital experiences, so the websites, the apps, etc. Right now we're divided into 9 autonomous teams. There are about 100 employees in digital operations right now. Each of those teams have adopted Agile in their own way. And just to give you an idea and to provide a little bit more context for what we're going to talk about and to explain why cross-function or cross-team collaboration is important to us, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the teams, just to give you an idea of what we do. So Jade is part of the CMS team. You'll see the top corner there. They're responsible for all of our content management systems, from text and images, sort of thing. Then we've got audio-video teams, 2 of them. They're responsible for the back end of our audio-video system, the content management system where all of our audio and video content is stored. They're also responsible for the presentation of that video content, so the actual player that you see on a website with the play button, the pause button, the scrubbing, all that kind of stuff. Then we've got the web presentation team that kind of brings all of these together. And I'm not going to go into all of the teams because we'd be here forever talking about them. But the web presentation team brings all of the components together and actually displays the HTML and the content to the audience. So what my team's currently working on is this responsive redesign where you'll start seeing new landing pages where you can browse through all of the stories available for the day, click on them, view the stories, there's embedded video in there, etc. So we're all working together to bring all of those components to our audience and deliver the best digital experience we possibly can. So we work together right now to build out the entire CBC digital experience. We're serving it to about 18 million unique visitors right now. So you can imagine that that makes product development pretty darn difficult. If you make a mistake or don't QA your release properly, it could be disastrous.
So what do we do well? Over the last 2.5 years, we've done quite a few things pretty well. It's not all doom and gloom. We've done a good job on a team level of putting in place agile frameworks like Kanban and Scrum. And we've done a pretty good job at adopting those mindsets in terms of how we act as a group and following those guidelines in terms of things like our team sizes, so that we're always working in teams that are not so large that there's too much overhead for us to be able to work. We've also done a very good job at focusing on a product lifecycle. We don't work in projects, we work in products. That prevents the project from being abandoned at the end once the group disbands, and makes it so that our projects and our products are not actually poorly maintained and abandoned. We also have co-located teams. They all sit together, they work together, and they're consistent. Our teams remain together throughout the life of our products. And when that product is no longer viable and it's shut down, then they move on.
Excuse me, what would be a product, for example? So you work on products, not projects. Example.
Sure. So a product in our case for my team would be the CMS team, where we're working on a product called Globally. And that product is what our team focuses on solely.
And for us, a product is a website or an application.
But if you have a team that's working on content distribution, how would you work in product? Because that sounds like something that spans a lot of other areas of research.
So the content distribution team focuses primarily on an API, which connects our various CMS systems, so our audio, video, and our text-based CMS systems to the front end as an API. So their product is that.
And your question is actually the premise of why we're here talking about cross-team collaboration, because as you can imagine, a team that's responsible for building an API that sends content from the content management system to the presentation team, you absolutely need to be able to coordinate those activities as best as you possibly can.
So yeah, in terms of what happens when we have one Scrum team, we know what that interaction should look like. We have roles, we have rules, we have meetings that are designed by frameworks like Scrum. We have a product owner, we have developers, we have a Scrum Master, and we know what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be talking to each other, and we're supposed to be making decisions in a certain way. But what happens when we have 3 teams? How about 4, 9, 150? And it becomes much, much more complicated the more teams that we add. And information starts becoming hidden, and it makes it much more difficult to be transparent. And that's what we're going to start talking about today. So having an open dialogue with staff. So about 2 years ago when we started this Agile journey, we started having a conversation with ourselves about how we would know that we were doing a good job. It seems like a simple question, but it can be rather tricky when we have 100 staff all doing different things. Part of what we did is we put together a staff survey. It's issued by Gallup, and it's done quarterly. And we started tracking these results and sharing them publicly. And we started asking questions like, do I know what is expected of me at work? At work, do I have an opportunity to do what I do best every day? And at work, do my opinions seem to count? So we would share this publicly, we'd get together, and we'd have a conversation about what can we do to improve these scores, to make our staff more happy, to give them a better understanding of what it is that we're doing. And this is our actual results that I'm sharing with you here. You'll see that we break it into a couple of different categories. We have growth, we have teamwork, management support, and basic needs. And each of these categories has a number of questions that have been designed by Gallup and by us that fit into each category. And you'll see on the left-hand side, that's April 2014, when we first started the survey, that we were averaging around 3.4 across all 4 categories. And as we go up to August, we've actually done a pretty decent job at raising the overall engagement and meeting the needs of our staff. So right now we're sitting at around a 4 average. And if that's as deep as we want to look, great, we've done our job. We've made sure that we started out with a staff that was neutral at best, and they're relatively happy now. But when we start diving into this a little bit further, we see that there are some questions that still remain, and that's what leads us to the conversation that we're having today. So, for instance, do I know what is expected of me at work? So, do I know what I'm supposed to be doing every day? Do I know how I'm supposed to be working every day? Which really directly ties into autonomous teams and Agile. We have 28.5% on average people responding with 3 or less, meaning that they're neutral or unhappy when they're asked the question if they know what they're doing every day. This last year, have I had an opportunity to learn and grow? Again, right at the heart of Agile. Learning and growing is really why we're doing this, so that we can be better, so that we can implement iteratively. And right now, 21.5% on average of our staff, so 1 in 5 people, are either neutral or unhappy with that, with their ability to learn and grow. Are my coworkers committed to doing quality work? So are the people sitting around me actually working, actually care what they're doing? Right now, 30% on average are saying that they are neutral or unhappy when they're asked this question. And that means that 1 in 3 think the person beside them doesn't care about what they're doing. In fact, they don't just think that they don't care, they think that they're doing bad work. So again, it looks great, but when we start to dig into it, we see that we still have a lot of room to grow. 70% of people saying that they're happy on most questions, that's great, but that's not good enough.
So especially for planning to grow opportunity, how all the team members get an opportunity to learn it? They're all in different growth, right? So
Yes, we'll get to part of that partway through the presentation, but really it's just around alleviating some of the pressure. Because right now they're time crunched, they've committed to deadlines, and they're just rush and get the work done. What we end up talking about is alleviating some of that pressure and giving them dedicated room to experiment and grow. So we talked about the fact that we seem to work really well in our teams. We actually got really good at being agile in our own core teams. Our staff even tells us as part of that engagement study that we seem to be improving. Actually, we've improved quite a bit since we first started issuing that survey. But as Jade alluded to, we still feel like something's missing, that we're still not doing something right because of all of the people that still aren't happy with the way that things are going. So before we transitioned to Agile, we used to work in a project-based environment where proposals were put forth to the project management office, they were reviewed, if they were approved, a team was formed around that work. I'll give you news redesign was a good example. Back in 2012, our news team, the people that actually create our news content, they write our stories and come up with a news strategy, said, our website's starting to feel a little bit old. They submitted a proposal to the Digital Operations Project Management Office. It was approved because we all agreed that it was a little bit outdated. A team was formed around that work, so a project manager, some developers, some designers, some QA people, and they spent the next 2 years building a new version of the news website. And in 2012, it went live with a big ta-da, and we were all so proud of everything that we did. But then, the next day, that project team was like, see you later. News website's done. We're going on now to build a new radio website. And that poor news website has sat there since 2012 with maybe minor modifications made here and there when news decided that they needed to add a new category or a new section or change the color because someone complained that we were too conservative or too liberal and whatever. You know how it goes. But here we are today with a website still in front of our audience that's over 4 years old. We knew that there was a problem. We thought that problem was orphaned products. So we organized ourselves into those 9 autonomous teams that I mentioned before, only to alleviate this problem of orphaned products. At that point, now someone owns that website. They live and they breathe it. 100% of their time is focused on constantly improving it, iterating, making it better, learning from the audience. But what that led us to is this issue of autonomy leading to a lack of clear collaboration and trust. Because each team was made autonomous. We said, you're in charge of this specific website. Go do whatever it takes to make it better. And they were hyper-focused on that specific task. They weren't thinking about the effect that it was going to have on any other team. They weren't working with the CMS team. So the CMS team was busy away making improvements to the CMS, adding new fields, adding items to drop-down lists. Were the website teams taking those new features into account as they were building the front-end audience experience? Absolutely not. We were all building our roadmaps, working with our stakeholders directly, modifying our agile processes. So some of us were in 1-week sprints, others were 2-week sprints, others were 3-week sprints, some of us were even Kanban. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a bad thing when you don't have any collaboration between the two teams. Because as my team realized, oh shoot, we need author photos to appear on landing pages beside a story so that you know that Neil MacDonald wrote that story and we think you'll click on it more. I needed to go over to the CMS team and say, can you add the ability for a journalist to upload a picture of their face in the CMS? And they'll say, oh shoot, sorry, we had our sprint planning this morning. We'll get to that maybe in our next sprint planning if we think it's an important enough feature to include. That sprint planning is 2 weeks away. Then if the release is happening at the end of that next 2-week sprint, we've gone 4 weeks without that author's face. really difficult. Now, like I said, it's not terrible that our sprints weren't aligned, but it is terrible if you don't have any collaboration. Because aside from me sending that request to have the author face uploaded in the CMS, we probably weren't talking very much through the rest of our work, because that team's focused on CMS and we're focused on the audience experience. End of story. Imagine yourself as a hockey team, and I think this relates quite well. Hockey teams have a series of different coaches responsible for each function. There's a goalie coach that's responsible for helping the goalie block shots and make sure that they have quick reflexes. There's an offensive coach required to help the offensive lines. I'm using football terms now because I just watched football last night. You get the point though. They make sure that the offensive skaters can move fast and score goals, and then you've got the defense coach that's responsible for protecting the net and making sure that they can block shots. If you have all of those coaches working with those teams or those players on the team directly, they get really, really good at their specific function. But if you don't have the coaches actually talking to each other, working collaboratively, coming up with a strategy for the gameplay, you end up like the Leafs and you don't win any games. We don't want to be like the Leafs. So, what we've realized through lots and lots of experimentation and reflection is that we've lacked shared goals within our leadership team. That lack of shared goals also led to lack of strategic alignment across the rest of the teams underneath that leadership team. I've already mentioned that we recognize that autonomy, as great as we thought it might be, has led us to a lack of true collaboration and trust. There's no support for learning and experimentation, and there's no capacity for that either. We're all just rushing to get our own work done. And we've actually put ourselves in this situation where we're guarding our work because we're afraid that the team next to us is going to disrupt us by asking for a feature that's going to throw off our whole schedule, and all the commitments we've just made to our stakeholders are going to go out the window. So we put up walls around ourselves, and we're actually quite nasty. When we ask each other for work, it's like, oh no, sorry, you should have asked us for that 3 months ago. Why didn't you give us enough notice? That, as you can imagine, has led to staff feeling stressed and disempowered.
All right. So my team is the content management system team, and we actually build all of the entry systems for text. So when you're writing a news story, for instance, you'd enter the headline and all of the body, and it would be processed on a different system to be displayed onto that. And a couple of months ago, my team was working on some changes. We went ahead and started working on them, and we figured, hey, there's new fields in the feed. That's not a big deal. The data that we provide out of our system is just going to have some extra information. Shouldn't upset anybody, shouldn't rock any boats. So, of course, we just went ahead and released them. Why not? It's not going to hurt anybody, at least so we thought. It took us 2 days to realize that the apps that rely on our system were now not showing video. So as Sam mentioned earlier, we have 18 million users every month. And now suddenly when they open up their phones, open up CBC News app, they don't have any video feed. Great, so what did our team do? We started working on a workaround. We wanted to reverse what we did so that the app would be fixed. At the same time, the app had to stop what they're doing and start working on fixing what we broke. So now we're working on a workaround, they're working on a fix. They have to ask Android and iOS app stores to go ahead and release their new version, which I don't know if any of you have experience with apps, can take between days and weeks. So in all, it took us a couple of days, and the whole time we were putting out this giant fire that we lit in the middle of CBC, and looking really foolish, not only to our internal stakeholders, News, who was furious that they didn't have their video content, but also to the 18 million users who were going into our app and getting really angry that their video wasn't working. And when they were getting angry, they'd stop opening the app. And that does exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do. So yeah, eventually we did fix the problem. But we could have done this differently. We could have had good cross-team collaboration. We could have spoken to one another and maybe avoided the situation to begin with. So what happens when we have good cross-team collaboration? Let's focus on that for a second. So we find room to collaborate. In the story that I just told you, if we'd had a conversation with all of the teams around us about what might this affect, we might have found a space where that team knew that something was going to go wrong or didn't, and we experimented with it. And our team knew we were making a change, and we could have worked together. We could have tested together. We could have made a plan to work together to put this out. And it wouldn't have made us embarrassed in front of all of our stakeholders. It wouldn't have made us embarrassed in front of our staff, and it wouldn't have made us embarrassed in front of all of those users trying to use our app. In fact, if we'd had a conversation and avoided this problem, we wouldn't have had to put out that fire. We set a huge fire when we started this problem because we didn't talk to each other. And that stopped us from doing our work, what we were planning on doing next. It stopped the apps team from being able to do what they were planning to do next. And it caused a mess. It also creates a more unified approach to problem solving when we collaborate. If we'd gotten together and had a conversation, we would have been able to come up with a way to move forward, to work together, and to get things done in a way that wouldn't have affected anyone. This small change shouldn't have affected anyone, and yet it did. And we could have avoided that completely. So by having good team communication, this whole situation just could have been avoided. And it's unfortunate that it wasn't. Which brings me to our core value statement. So in May and June of this year, we started having a conversation. Our department was growing and we knew we needed to hire. So of course we started having a conversation about hiring the right people. And who are the right people? And what is an agile person? And we know that they're going to fit in our agile organization, and for that matter, what is agile? So this whole conversation started, and we kind of fell backwards into this conversation about what is agile. And what we came up with is what's on the board here: collaboration, learning, and improvement. As an agile organization, we believe in those three things: collaboration, learning, and improvement. And we will use this value, to guide everything that we're going to do, because that means that we're moving forward in an agile way. And as long as people that we hire follow these three principles, they'll fit in as well. So our management team got us together, and the product owners, the functional managers, and all of the Scrum Masters or Agile team leads, and we had this conversation and we formed this value statement. And then management did something kind of awesome at this point. They said, go talk to your teams and talk to them about what do they think, or what do these things mean to them? What is collaboration? What is collaboration not? And how do we know when we're learning, and how do we know when we're improving, and how do we know when we're not? But they didn't ask us to measure this. They didn't say, now we've got this new core value set, prove to us that you're using it. They got out of our way. They said, let this guide you. Let this be the light that helps you make decisions. And then they let us use it. And I can tell you that every time our team is about to make a decision about when we're going to release something, about who we should be communicating with, we ask ourselves, does this fit in with our values? Is this going to help us collaborate, learn, and improve? If we're deciding to build something, are we collaborating, learning, and improving? Are we measuring the right things? Are we talking to the right people? So this one value statement has actually changed everything about the way we work together, because we've gotten together and established what we value as a department.
So, how did we get there? First off, our managers formed a real team. Previously, they were functional managers, so we had a manager responsible for our group of developers, a manager responsible for our QA people, a manager responsible for all of our agile team leads, another manager for all of our product owners. They actually had really no reason to talk to each other in the past, but now they formed a real team. They exhibit collaboration and act as role models now that that core value statement is in place. For the rest of the department, they're now looked up to, and they exemplify collaboration in everything they do. So those core values now serve as the guiding principles for everything that all of the teams do as well. And It also led to us, now that the core values were in place, we recognized that we had some pretty fundamental problems with our department. The way that we structured our meetings, we had such a lack of focus on transparency was terrible. So now we focus on transparency quite a bit. We developed a new mindset, and finally we emphasized the importance of building relationships with our peers. So after going through that list, it actually makes things seem quite simple. Why didn't we do this earlier? I guess that's hindsight for you. So we'll take the rest of the time to share some of our successes and failures, what we used to do, why it didn't work, and what we're doing now and why we think it works better. Hopefully you can take some of these tips away and get to cross-team collaboration a lot faster than we did.
All right, so we tried to solve the problem with meetings. We thought, hey, we need to be transparent. We need to share the things that we're learning and building with each other. So why not form a meeting? We'll get everyone into the room, no problem, and everyone will figure out what's going on. They'll go back to their teams and they'll share that information. However, there are a lot of problems with the meetings that we put together. So we have the product platform update meeting up there. We have the content backlog update meeting there. These are meetings that are in their 5,000th iteration. We've tried them. We've tried different ways to do them. And they always kind of end up in the same way. And it's not that the people who were running the meeting had ill intentions. They were trying to do something good, get people into a room and try to get them to do, or to talk to each other about things that were happening. Now, the problem here is that when you put a bunch of people in a room and ask them to sit there for an hour and have one particular team pitch everything on their roadmap or go through a walkthrough of everything that they've built over the last 6 months or a year, it's really boring for a lot of people. If they're not directly involved, they don't want to come. In fact, even if they are there, they're probably not paying attention. They've drifted. They're staring at the floor, they're staring at their watch, wondering when this is going to end. And that's kind of the problem there. It's created a false transparency, which is to say that you think you've spread that information to people that were in the room or the people on the meeting invite, but really they didn't hear you or they didn't show up and they have no idea what you were talking about. You believe that you've been transparent, but really you've actually created a problem where now you think that you share the information, but you really haven't. Also, individual stakeholder meetings. These are meetings where a product owner would get together with a stakeholder and have a conversation about what should be built next. It seems pretty standard. Most organizations do this in some shape or form. But as Sam mentioned earlier, we all rely on each other to actually build the products that we're building. Content management system doesn't exist in a vacuum. We need to work with the API team to make sure if we're building a new feature that the API gets it and that they pass it on to Sam's team who's building the front end of the website. And if we don't do that, then the features that we're building are actually useless. So what would happen here is they would get into a room, they'd have a conversation one-on-one, Sam would talk to her stakeholders, and they'd end up in a situation where only half of the situation, or only half of the product could be discussed, because they weren't in a position to actually go further into that. And then the all-staff update. Again, our management team was very well-intentioned. They'd get together and they'd make a bunch of decisions about how our team should be, things that we should be doing, and all of those things that management teams decide, and then they just come and drop it on us once a month. Here's everything we decided over the last month. Again, great, but is everyone showing up? Is everyone paying attention? Did you involve the right people in that decision-making process? And that's kind of the problem with these meetings is they just weren't interactive. They weren't involving the right people. They weren't getting people involved in a way that would be interesting. And so we created, like I said, false transparency. All right, so I've talked to you a bit about the meetings that don't work. There's been a lot of them. I want to spend a couple minutes talking to you about some meetings that we're doing now and talk to you about why we think they're working. They're a lot different now that we've got our core value statement. We can reflect on our meetings and see how we can improve. And so I'll go through a couple of those with you now. The first one is the integrated demo. This is a meeting for all staff and stakeholders. We get together once every 3 weeks. And we talk about what we've built every 3 weeks. Each team gets between 5 and 7 minutes to talk, which doesn't sound like a lot of time. But you actually get across a lot of information because you're only talking about the last 3 weeks. Preference is given to working software. The difference being here that if it's working in terms of, let's say, a unit test. A unit test is working software, so that could be shown. You might have designers working on a new design for the front-end website. That could be shown. You might have a small function update. That could be shown. It doesn't have to be these monolithic products that are huge and will take an hour to explain. It can be teeny tiny iterations that you're working on. Also, preference is given to cross-team priority tasks. So if you're working with another team, you'll probably want to talk about that first. So we built this feature and that allowed Sam's team to build that feature. And those are the things that we're showing. Part of what makes this really interactive is the fact that this isn't a product owner delivered meeting. Sometimes the product owner will go up and do the presentation for their team. Other times it'll be a developer. Other times, last week, one of my QA people went and delivered for this meeting and demonstrated a new MVP that we built. So everybody's involved. Everybody sees something different. One team, like I said, might be showing something as simple as an automated test, and the next team might be showing a new MVP. So it's always a change, and even if you do drift off, there's something that's going to catch your eye and bring you back into the meeting. One other key highlight here is no questions are asked during the meeting. Because we've only got an hour, it's every 3 weeks, and there's everyone there. We choose to actually hold people to the end of the meeting and ask them to have conversations with the teams that interested them then. You can go a lot deeper when you're having a private conversation outside of the room than you can in the middle of the meeting. And it also allows people to actually find room to collaborate and move forward. Oftentimes, if you're having a meeting like this and you're pitching your product, someone will ask a question, I give an answer, they walk away, and they forget all about it because the rest of the meeting has distracted them. Excuse me. So another thing here is because it's getting everyone together, all the staff, all the stakeholders, anyone who's interested in the product, it's creating a bigger picture visualization for our teams. They can see what everybody is working on, what everybody is doing, and see how they fit into that bigger picture. The next meeting is the integrated Scrum. So the integrated Scrum is a 15-minute daily meeting, and one representative comes from every team. And they have a conversation about things that will affect cross-team dependencies, so issues from one team to the next. So in our case, if the CMS is making a change that may affect, for instance, apps, we go and we present that. This happens every day before our daily stand-ups so that people who are at the integrated Scrum can go back to their teams and let them know what's happening on an organizational level. Again, it gives our developers a chance to spend 15 minutes every day together, and they build a bit of a team of their own. Right? They're talking, they're having conversations after the meeting, they're building friendships, and that makes it a lot easier later when you're working on something to go over and talk to that person and get help or assistance as needed because you've spoken to them just today. So they formed a much more unified team. And not only that, but they formed a brain trust. Because they're getting together every day to discuss issues, dependency issues, and try to identify ways to solve them, they've actually formed a team that is very capable of solving issues long before they ever become issues. If I get into the room and I know that I'm about to break something for the apps team, we can all have a conversation, all coming from different backgrounds, all having experience in different products, and potentially solve that issue really quickly before it ever becomes an issue. It also helps with the idea of bottom-up decision-making. So because these people are getting together, they're trying to resolve things, they're having discussions about how to solve issues, they are able to make a decision, and then that, from those experts who are in the room, will feed out to the rest of the staff and up to management that this is no longer an issue, we've made a decision, it's resolved. So it has a lot of great benefits, and it allows our teams to get together and to find issues long before they actually are issues.
So Jade alluded to the fact that we had separate stakeholder meetings in the past. I would get together with my stakeholders. There's a group of about 40 or 50 of them. We'd all pack into a room every other week. And we'd start talking about how we can collaborate to build the best digital experience for their audience. And again, it was the same representatives of news, sports, radio, TV, etc. And we often found ourselves in this situation where if you're asking for a feature like this picture of Neil MacDonald to appear on the landing page beside his story, it's not just my team that gets that photo to appear. It's 3 other teams involved in that work. And so when someone asks me to do that work, I either answer by saying, oh, sorry, that's not in my realm of responsibility, I'll have to go talk to the team involved, or we find ourselves starting to make assumptions. Well, what if they added an upload button in the CMS that just allows you to upload your face beside your story? And it got us into a bit of trouble, because not only were a lot of our assumptions incorrect, because we don't know the inner workings of the content management system, but I would often get the message lost in translation. I'm a decent communicator, but when you're sitting down with someone and you're telling them, oh, these 5 things came up in our meeting this afternoon, can you make sure you get to them next week? They're not getting the tone of the request. They're losing the context for why the request is important. They didn't hear from news that their new part of their new strategy for the next 5 years is to highlight journalist personalities so that the audience can really connect with those people as human beings and not just as anonymous writers behind a computer. So all of that is lost unless I can do a really great job of dumping all the information on them at once, but I don't. Now, everyone involved in this redesign project meets with the stakeholders together. So we've got at least 3 product owners in the room at the same time with these 40 or 50 stakeholders. We're all hearing the same message at the same time. We're able to work together to make decisions on the spot. So as we're asking for that author's face, the CMS team is saying, well, there is a feature that kind of exists like that. Maybe we can modify it slightly and we'll actually be able to get that to you next week. We all say, wow, that's amazing. Okay, well, I'll remember to move that story up in my backlog so that we can get to it the week after. So it's really, really important for us now to all be in the same room at the same time, collaborating, making sure that we're making decisions together, making sure that we're all hearing the message at the same time. It's made a really big difference to how we work. Transparency was the other thing that I said we put a lot of focus on. And I think it's a huge factor when you're trying to build trust and especially encourage collaboration with teams. We started super, super simple. We implemented 3 tools: Git for code, Jira for all of our backlogs and user stories, and Confluence for all of our documentation. Now, tools are not the solution for everything, of course, but it was a great foundation for us. It made sure that all of our work was visible to everyone else in the organization. We could quickly assign code to someone else for code review if we're working on their product or it was going to have an effect on something else they were doing. In Jira, we could comment to each other and everyone could see the messages. You could see the priority of tickets. You could watch tickets and follow their progress through the different workflows and say, oh, that author photo that I'm waiting for is currently in progress and John over there is working on it, so I'm going to go ask him how it's going. It allows for the visibility of the work to be apparent. And then documentation in Confluence, it makes it so easy to share links back and forward. If you're looking for something, you just open Confluence and quickly search for it, and it likely appears. So, like I said, tools are great. It laid a great foundation for us, but it wasn't the be-all, end-all solution. We also tried having the product owners actually talk to each other for a change. Novelty. We started to meet quarterly, and this is recent. I think we just started at the beginning of this calendar year. The first meeting was really interesting. We all got into a room together, and we spent the first half of the day talking about what we were going to talk about. How do we work better together? It seemed so difficult at the time. But we ended up in the afternoon spending about 4 hours filling out this spreadsheet. All of us brought our own roadmaps, and like I said, we had these barriers around us. Like, this is my work, and it's the most important, and I'm gonna spend the whole day here protecting it or advocating for why everyone should be doing what I'm working on, supporting me, and only my tickets and my backlog. So we all brought our roadmaps to this table, and we filled out this spreadsheet. Imagine it. Down one column, we've got all of the features that each team, 9 teams, are going to be delivering in the next 3 months. Across the top, we've got each of the teams listed. And so the exercise was go down this list of features and identify the dependencies. So So if I'm working on a website redesign, go across all of the different teams, and what does the CMS team need to contribute to this work? What does the API team need to contribute? What does the analytics team, and so on and so forth. You can imagine, at the end of the day, we had a massive spreadsheet. Two things became extremely clear to us. One, we tried to do too much work. We had 55 items down the one column. For 9 teams in 3 months, that's absolutely ridiculous. Second thing is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, when we transitioned to Agile, one of our goals was to be autonomous. We thought that that was the solution to everything. This spreadsheet made it very clear that not only did we not eliminate dependencies, we actually made it worse. We had X's in almost every column and row because every team needed to contribute to every other piece of work that was going on in the organization. So after that first meeting, we had lots and lots of other meetings to talk about that meeting and reflect on it, kind of a retrospective times 10, to try and figure out how we could do things better. Now, what we're using that day for, and we have our day actually tomorrow, where all the product managers are going to get together, we now focus on 3 objectives. And they're not only our team objectives or our department objectives, they're the organization's 2020 objectives. So what are the 3 things that CBC wants digital operations to contribute to in the next 5 years? How can our entire department work together to accomplish those 3 goals? Rather than all of us saying, oh, you know, I'm going to add a feature to the sports app that lets me pick my favorite sports, or in the news app, follow the next live stream of Prime Minister Trudeau giving his speech. You know, it's so much more clear to us now that we need to have shared objectives to work towards, and that actually forces collaboration, whether we like it or not. Now we have to work together because we're all working towards a shared goal. So aside from that meeting, we also have 2 other things that promote transparency. One is that teams are encouraged to use physical boards whenever possible. If you walk through the 9th floor of CBC, you'll know right away that it's digital operations because there are stickies everywhere. Some teams choose to use stickies on walls, others put them on portable whiteboards, others put them on digital screens. Yes, question?
How do you reconcile that emphasis on physical methods with keeping records in Jira?
Records aren't super important to us. Records are the past. We're all about looking forward, and if something doesn't work, we'd rather talk about how to change it and work towards something better in the future than to look back and, I don't know, monitor what we've done, or I can't remember the last time I actually looked back in Jira to figure out what had happened on what date. Is there anything particular in mind that...
I'm just thinking about in-sprint reporting, for example. So if you want burn down charts, that kind of thing, then you need to have data in Jira. And it's one of the benefits of having a system like Jira.
Yeah.
And so that, and I guess the other thing is, if you have distributed teams, then how do you share these things from one location to another?
Right, so for us, it might be controversial, but we don't actually do any type of reporting for our team. We focus primarily on qualitative, and actually quantitative in a sense, but qualitative velocity and team sense of happiness. During our retrospectives, we just look at how much work we were able to accomplish, and it's a lot now. At the time, we're high-performing teams, and we're working really well as an agile group, and now that we've got our cross-collaboration going, we're delivering a lot. And we can actually measure that in just the number of releases that we have, and the general happiness of the team. So we dropped burn down charts over a year ago. I'm looking at Alice, our Scrum Master. Yes, over a year ago, we don't do any velocity reporting, any of that anymore.
So why use Jira?
Jira is just a community space for all of our work to exist. It's the place where all of our developers go when they're looking to pick up new work. My team actually works in Kanban style, so I create all the tickets, I make sure that they're in order of priority, and then when a developer needs work, they just come, they grab the first item, they assign it themselves. If they need help, they comment at a designer saying, can you attach a new design, or I've run into this problem, can you come talk to me and figure it out? We can work with other teams a lot more easily that way, so that I can assign a ticket to someone on Jade's team if we need help from the CMS, that sort of thing. That's what we use Jira primarily for.
Can I add one more comment? Because also we use the entire Atlassian tool, so we use Bamboo, Jade, and also which one? So that we need to. Yeah, we use Bitbucket as well. So we also use Jira to have some code visibility. So we know when in Bamboo, for instance, where this is happening, what tickets are there, and therefore what Jira ticket that they map to.
And some teams also do use Jira primarily. Sam just mentioned digital boards. Our team actually uses the Jira dashboard system to present our information on a big screen TV that's on wheels that we roll around so that everyone can see it as they're walking by. Physical task boards in a lot of different scenarios are updated by the team as they go, but Jira is their primary place for it. The physical task board is so that if somebody's walking through the room, they can look and see how things are going. If it's a couple minutes out of date, that's generally okay.
Finally, we have a dependency board that we place in our kitchen. It's actually what's pictured there. So all the teams are listed down on one side, and then they each have a color that represents their team, so that across the top you can see to do, in progress, and done. And the different colored stickies represent the dependencies. So there's some teams there that have almost a solid color all the way across. It means they're pretty much dependency free. They're able to work on their own thing pretty autonomously. But then there are other teams where you see their row is filled with all kinds of different stickies. It means that they're helping a lot of other teams deliver their products. So we put this in our kitchen so that everybody that's walking in and out of our department has a chance to see it, glance at it, check where their piece of work is.
Do you reflect this dependency in Jira as well?
No, we don't duplicate this board. It would be impossible to update. Each of the functional teams have meetings once a week or bi-weekly, once a week. And they actually take their teams to this board, so all of the Scrum Masters go together, all of the QA people go together, developers, etc., and they update this board. If we were having to update it to reflect every single change, and sometimes I'm at the microwave warming up my lunch, and I'm like, oh shoot, we did that already, and I'll move the sticky. If I had to go back to Jira and do it all over again, it would just take too much time, and they would always be out of sync.
And this board will only reflect dependency about blockers, risks, everything?
It's primarily dependency based. It's just about what I'm working on that might affect another team. So, for instance, I'm the orange color there. We are third from the top, CMS. You'll see that there's purple. That means that actually that's Sam's color. So you'll see that my team at the time of this picture was working on something for Sam's team. We don't worry about things like blockers at this level. It's really just to make sure that we're aware that there is a dependency so that we can have conversation. All of these tools are really just there as that tools, so that we can start conversations amongst each other about what we need to do to move forward and to get things out of the way. That's why we have all of these meetings, to get us all into a room to talk about them.
So who puts the post Sam for your scenario? Does Sam put that?
Primarily, my team would put up my team's stickies and things that we're working on. I put up that purple sticky. So I keep track of what our group is doing, and I will go ahead and update it if I'm working on something with Sam's room.
Because we actually talk to each other now, he knew to write that sticky because I asked for it.
She did indeed. We are.
Yes, and sorry, that came up in another question. We're extremely lucky. We're all located on the same floor in a single building. We don't have the challenge where we've got people spread across the country or even overseas. Yes.
Sam actually sits about 30 feet.
One of the last things that we realized in this whole transformation, and I think I've made this pretty clear, talking to each other helps. And not just talking to each other in a business context, but building social relationships. And one of the questions that the staff engagement survey asks is, do you have a best friend at work? When we all first saw that, even when Gallup issued it a long time ago, I read through it and I was like, that's ridiculous. So then our management team adopted it and I was like, are you kidding me? I come here to work, not develop my social circle. Why do I need to have a best friend at work? Anyways, I checked off the box and I submitted it, and then, it actually came up. Our management team sits with us and they review the results of the survey, and of course someone, wasn't me, asked, why do you ask that question? It's ridiculous. And the management team reads the Gallup response and it describes how social relationships are important for your well-being and blah, 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 and I thought exactly that, blah, 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 move on. But what we've come to realize is now through that whole core value statement that we've developed, and we're all about collaboration and learning and improvement, we started doing social gatherings. It started with just our own team, so we'd go out for a team lunch the last Friday of every month, and we'd sit together and quietly discuss the work that we just left behind, and then we'd leave and move on. Eventually it turned into something that we all looked forward to, like, when's our next team lunch? Where are we going? What new restaurant can we try? And we talk and talk and talk, and it was so hard to get people to leave at that point. 2 hours in, I'm like, hey guys, we gotta go back to work. There's work waiting for us. It quickly expanded from just our teams to us including other teams. So Jade's team and my team, we've gone bowling together. Other teams have done escape rooms. We still do the lunches. It then expanded even further. And now on the last Friday of every month, the entire department gets together and we have drinks and snacks and music, and sometimes we play games. And it has made an amazing difference. To see the transformation in our department, it's been incredible. Just putting these slides together and looking at all of the pictures, reflecting, it's unbelievable the difference it's made. So now, in the past, people would sit at their desk, they'd come across a problem in the morning and they'd have their headphones in and they'd be trying to solve it alone at their own computers. And finally 5 o'clock rolls around and they're like, oh my God, I can't do it. I've just spent 8 hours trying to solve this problem. I'm finally going to cautiously word this email and ask John for help. The next day, John will come in, he'll think about it, oh shoot, I don't know the answer to that either, and sit there for another day and finally write back at the end saying, well, I think this might help you, try this. Meanwhile, 3 days go by, and these two people have just been sitting there trying to solve the problems by themselves. After having all of these social outings, and sharing laughs and sharing stories and tidbits about your personal lives, you develop these relationships that now make it possible for you to get up out of your chair when you have a problem and walk across the aisle and ask the person for help right away. You might not just be asking for help, you might be asking for advice, you might have an idea that you want to bounce off of someone. It makes it so much easier to actually talk to people when you've already built that social relationship. So when you're asked, do you have a best friend at work, don't think it's ridiculous. It's actually a really, really great thing. It gives you someone to confide in. It gives you that level of trust with your whole department. It makes it so much easier to just talk and share ideas, ask questions, although you may think they're stupid, they're not.
All right, so we talked a lot today about different meetings that we've done. We talked about our core mindset and our core values now. And we've made a lot of changes to the way that we communicate and work together. And so we circle all around this issue, but we haven't really nailed exactly what we did. So up on the board, you'll see that there are 9 teams represented there. Those are our 9 autonomous teams from the before. And it's really simple for us to think, okay, we're 9 autonomous teams. We have 9 missions. We have 9 products or more. And we are individual groups. And it's not really until we start to stop and think about it that we realize a more complex picture. We are one product and we are one team. We are all building the visual representations of CBC. We are building the apps, we are building the website. We are all working together to do that. And when we start realizing that we have to come together, that we are just doing one thing together, it changes the way we think about everything. Everything that we're doing is together, one way or another. Even if we work on it autonomously, in the end, it's going to be fit together to present to the audience. And it's going to go from our journalists out to the viewers. So this changed everything for us. Once we realized that we had to start looking at the bigger picture, that our teams had to start thinking of themselves not just as small little silos, but great big organization of 100 people. That's when everything changed. Our meetings are formed to represent this. The way we collaborate, the way we share information, everything we do revolves around this concept. Digital Operations is one team. We are 9 autonomous teams that all form one team. And we are all building one product.
So, what's changed? Just to summarize, our management team actually formed a real team. I mentioned they now get together for 2 hours every day and they talk about how to enable us, how to empower us, how to make sure that we can remain autonomous but collaborative. Our engagement survey for employees is now issued quarterly, and we make sure to review the results with staff and create action plans to make sure that we're actually improving every time. And that chart that Jade showed, we're on a steady increase up. One day we might actually get to a 5. Organizational priorities are communicated clearly. So we have a shared set of 3 objectives now that we're all working towards. All teams know what they are, they know what's most important, and they can collaborate effectively to achieve those 3 things. The core value statement, it guides absolutely everything we do. Our social relationships, our transparency, the way that we work together to achieve those shared goals. We have new meetings that have a clear focus, and finally, transparency is mandated across the entire floor.
All right, so what does the future look like? Well, are we perfect? And the answer is absolutely not. We're farthest thing from perfect. I don't want to stand up here and give you the false assumption that we have everything figured out. We absolutely do not. But we know that. And we know that we are on a path for collaborating, for learning, and for improving. Now that we have that core value set, we're able to commit to ourselves and to each other that those are the things that we want as a department and as an organization. And we're able to use that to change things going forward. A lot of the things that we've talked about today probably won't look like this in 6 months. Maybe we won't have an integrated demo anymore. Maybe that'll change. Maybe we won't be 9 autonomous teams. In fact, that's already changing. We're bringing in another team in a couple of months. Maybe things will be vastly different. Who knows? But what we do know is now that we have an idea of what we believe in and what we uphold as a department, that we can keep moving forward in a unified way and that we can keep building on what we've already done. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you guys coming and listening to us. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to share them with us.
I have 2 additional answers for the question you asked at the beginning. One, and it was about the opportunity to experiment and grow and learn. So as Jade mentioned at the very beginning, one of the things that we got really good at was adopting Agile within our own teams, and learning and experimenting and being Agile is core to who we are, just fundamentally right from the very beginning. That was never an issue for us in this transition. So we are always testing with our audience, doing guerrilla tests, A/B tests. They inform every decision we make. But we also allow our employees to do 20% of exploratory time or innovation time. So they can choose to do that however they want. 1 day a week, multiple days a month, a week every whatever, however many months, just to explore and learn and come up with proof of concepts for different ways that they want to be doing things. And a lot of times that gets incorporated right into our work because they're all super great and they love what they do, so they always spend their time wisely.
Was your success or your progress because of the organic things that happened on your team, or was it the leadership which seemed to be truly sponsoring this, or was it a combination of both? What's your perspective on this?
Definitely a combination, I'd say. So the leadership team, it was a fundamental change for us. Like I said, our managers always operated completely separately and they never really spoke to each other. When they were told to come together and form a real team, that's when the changes started happening. They helped develop that core value statement, and then it just guides everything that we do. And it did happen organically to some extent, because like I said, we first focused on our teams, and that wasn't the focus of this presentation. But before all of this happened, we got really, really good at just working together in our own teams. And I don't know if you've seen that agile chart where you kind of go from forming to storming to norming to performing. We made sure we were on the upward swing of that before we started focusing on cross-team collaboration. But yes, so many things contributed to the transition.
So did you have one, if I may, did you have one sponsor or leader who just made this happen? Because experiences say that if you don't have that leadership, it doesn't matter at the manager level or the team level, this stuff doesn't
Absolutely,
happen.
yes.
So not necessarily that it was one sponsor, really.
Okay.
We have a group of managers that even before they were really working as a team were dedicated to making Agile happen at our organization. And they really have been behind the whole thing since day one. They've really empowered their groups to work in an Agile way, and they've focused on not only how do they become more Agile, but how do they empower our teams to be more Agile as well.
we're really lucky in that sense.
So I see you have continuous improvement. In order to do that, you have to learn from your mistakes. I see that you've highlighted some of the problems you have. Can you tell me more about how you're learning from mistakes, how you're telling people about your mistakes? Because I think I'm from RBC. One of the things we're looking at right now is just embracing failure and being able to make that a step towards getting better. Just what if you could share
so many
something about
examples. And we love to admit our failures because they're opportunities for learning. And I think part of it comes back to not only is our management team extremely supportive of that idea, so there's really no one in the organization that's really pressuring us to not fail. The stakeholders were to some extent. In the very beginning of the transition, they were really hesitant. And I'm sure you can relate. We've got an audience of 18 million Canadians. How can you possibly put out a website that might fail, that might fall apart because the infrastructure can't support it, or a feature might not resonate with the audience? All of that, I think, is made easier with data-driven decisions. So if we can track everything that we do and measure it in some way, presenting that back to the people who are anxious, it makes it so much easier. And I feel like that was the turning point for us when we realized that data could tell a better story than opinions or anxiety. It really started moving us forward a lot faster in the right direction.
Not only that, but we constantly have a conversation about, is something working or not? We have a safe environment. Our management team doesn't freak out if we question them about something. It's not unusual for me to go to my manager or the entire management team with all of the functional managers and say, you know what, that meeting that you do, it sucks. Let's do something better. In fact, that's how we got rid of a number of the meetings that I was talking about. I was doing some research on different ways that we could do meetings, and I went to the management team at the beginning of the year and I said, you know what, you're doing 3 meetings right now and all of them are terrible. Let's do this instead. And they said, okay, no problem, let's try it. And they gave me the latitude to do that because we are a safe environment. I wasn't afraid to do that. And a lot of decisions happen that way. So we can constantly question what we're doing and admit when we're failing.
The other thing on that, I think, is the continuous deployment and getting our stakeholders and even our audience used to this idea of continuous iteration. In the past, like I mentioned, and this is where the stakeholder anxiety comes from, we'd build a website and as soon as it was done, we'd ship it and then the team would disappear. And so our news team now, even when we started this redesign project that I'm currently working on, there was this terrible fear that they had to get all of the work right up front because one day the team might disband and they'd never see developers again to get changes made. So we've got this really great digital head at CBC who's actually setting the bar quite low for us right now, and I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not, but he's setting the expectation with all of the stakeholders that when we launch this new website, it's the start of a fresh beginning for us. It's the first time that we're actually going to have a product team maintaining the website, and it's going to be iterative development. So when we first put it in front of the audience, engagement may drop 20%. And that we're okay with that because we know the next day we're going to do another release, another A/B test, and make sure that we're constantly improving. And we've got the tools now and the foundation laid for that type of development to happen so that we can be iterative, so that we can be learning from our audience. So failure is almost welcomed. We're okay with it. We know it's going to happen. Nobody likes change, especially our audience. They're a very tough crowd to please. But I think we've all come to grips with the fact that that's okay as long as we just continuously learn and show that we're learning and improve those learnings.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're actually a little over time at this point, so.
There's feedback cards down the table if you want to fill them out.
Yes, please.
Grab them.
We'd love your feedback.
Yeah, and we'd actually prefer if you did it on the app because then it goes right out.